Hi, this is Chris Marchand of Between the Songs podcast. I'm here with Joe Cook to tell you about another podcast we've created, and we hope, if you've enjoyed Between the Songs, that you'll enjoy this one too.
It's called Nostalgic Future Podcast, and that's what it's all about. Chris and I dive deep into our nostalgia, all the pop culture stuff that we grew up with, and we examine how it's influenced our lives and how that continues today and into the future.
So join us for fun discussions about some of our favorite movies, television shows, music, books. Really, nothing is off limits. We even have special guests on from time to time to talk about some of their nostalgic obsessions.
Check out Nostalgic Future Podcast, available now on all the big podcasting apps, and you can also follow us on social media. It's Nostalgic Future Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and we're at Past Future Pod on Twitter.
Nostalgic Future Podcast, where the past is the only way forward.
When I was a kid, my parents would never let me watch cowboy and Indian movies because I always cried when the Indians got killed. And the Indians always got killed. That's why we can have a conference here. So, kind of grew up with a partiality towards them. And,
I'm living on a Navajo reservation. Well, it's about the size of West Virginia, yeah. New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. I live up in the Four Corners area.
Well, for the since last fall, I've been building a house.
Really? By hand, yourself?
Yes.
Why do you laugh?
Well, because I'm so nervous that I'm going to go home and it won't be there anymore. Because we had planned on, getting someone else to do stuff that we knew nothing about. And, but it's hard to get people to work for you when you're not around to check on their work. So, we dug out we're building two. I live on a Navajo reservation, and so we wanted to build these traditional Navajo 8-sided houses called hogans. They're log houses, and they have 8 sides. They're really, really beautiful to look at. And so we decided, we can do this. We'll get someone to pour the foundation. So we dug, and being a musician, I'm not terribly well, and there are a lot of musicians who are wonderfully mathematical. I'm terrible at math. And so, man, we dug. It looked like the Grand Canyon by the time we had dug out the, the trench where we're going to put the footer. And, got the footer poured, and then we're like, okay, we're going to leave for a month. And so we hired someone to come in and put the foundation down. They never did it. We got back. It wasn't done, so we hired someone else. They didn't do it. So then we got back and we just did it ourselves. And then since then we keep going, well, we'll get someone else to do this. We'll get someone else. No one does. So we've done it all. And it's the cool thing about it is, first of all, a hogan is just such a perfectly nice place. Even if you do it badly, it's cool.
Her question is, how has God used me on the Navajo reservation? Well, I'm not a big believer in God using people that much. I think that what God has done in my life since I've been on the Navajo reservation is He's made me more aware of how quirky Middle Americans are and all people are, and of how when I was in Thailand, I met this missionary, and I was talking about, I said, I just really want the Lord to use me, and she said, well, forget it. God doesn't need you for anything. God doesn't want to use you. He wants you to love Him. And so that's really what I'm trying to do there. I think more than anything else is learn how to love Him. And I think I would do that if I was still in Kansas. And that's sort of a lifelong process. One of the cool things, as my dad got older, was watching how God continued to work in his life and continued to bring him into a deeper walk with the Lord. So, I'm not a lot of people want to make a big deal about going to the reservation. I think it's sort of missing a lot, because it was sort of for my own salvation that I went, not to save anybody else.
So welcome to the 20th anniversary Window Rock tribute events for Rich Mullins. My name is Chris Marchand. The reason I'm here, I'm friends with Joe Cook, and we host a podcast together. And we wanted to do a quick question and answer with some very important people. And Joe, why don't you take it from here?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our live taping, and this is of course, as he said, a really special night, and I'm so thankful that all of you turned out here to be with us. We've got some really special guests with us on stage, but kind of below the stage right now. To my right is Chuck Harper. Chuck is the director of Western Indian Ministries and founder of Christ for Native Youth, and of course, Rich Mullins was an important part of Christ for Native Youth, and I'm sure Chuck will tell us a little bit about that. To Chuck's right is singer-songwriter Andrew Osenga, and Andrew, yeah, absolutely. Andrew is just a super talented guy, and Rich was a big influence on him, and he is actually involved in some Rich Mullins projects that are in the pipeline. Mitch McVicker was sitting next to him a moment ago, and maybe Mitch will come back. But over there is Rich's brother, David Mullins. And, yeah, we are so thrilled to have David with us tonight. And next to David is a surprise guest that we had no idea was coming. That is Rich's longtime dear friend and founding member of his early band, Zion, Elizabeth Lutz. He said, don't give her the mic. And here's Mitch McVicker.
He just climbed the window rock. He's a little out of breath.
Well, we since we're running a little late, we're going to kind of do this a little bit abbreviated, but we wanted to start off by asking a question over here to my friend Chuck Harper, because as we know, Window Rock and the Navajo Nation held a really special place in Rich Mullins' heart. And Chuck, I know that you were kind of there in the beginning of that with him, and I just kind of want to know, how did you connect with Rich? Tell us a little bit of the story of how he ended up coming out here.
Oh, test. Well, first of all, thanks for the cap, and I love it. Well, I think the year was 1992. I was doing your job at KHAC as the manager.
I'm sorry.
And I'd always wanted to bring concerts to Window Rock, and so we invited this band here who, anyway, they came, did their thing, they left. We said, we are never having another concert here. We lost our shirt. The people were rude. They didn't like the hotels in Window Rock. They said the only reason it's okay is because we're just taking a shower and then we're leaving. And anyway, I just had this awful taste in my mouth about concerts. A month later, I get a call from Gay Quisenberry, and she says, there's this guy named Rich Mullins who wants to come and do a concert there. I said, sorry, I probably hung up on her. And she called me right back and said, you know, this guy Rich, let me tell you about him. He wants to come to Window Rock, no cost. He wants to sleep on a church floor. You can have all the money that, if you sell tickets, take an offering, whatever, it's fine. Whatever you want to do, he just wants to come there. And so I said, well, let me think about it. What's some of his songs? So I went to our music library, the old LP, you know, the 45s. I found Awesome God, Screen Door, a couple of songs we played all the time. And so I took him home and I told Cindy, what do you think? This guy wants to come. There's got to be a big catch here. No cost. He's willing to sleep on the floor. And so we prayed about it, said, okay, we'll do it. And we'll take a chance on this one. So anyway, Rich ended up coming back in 1992. We had a concert here in Window Rock and over in Tuba City. And he had actually ended up getting snowed in here for about a week. He wanted to stay for a while. That was the catch, that he could stick around for a while and just get to know the people. So we got to know him while he was here, and that was the beginning of a long friendship that has just changed all of us.
How did that turn into Rich eventually moving out here?
Well, he would come out at spring break. He'd come out in the summer times, and we got to do a lot of horseback riding. We climbed canyons. We went for hikes. We just got to know him, and the more we got to know him, the more we loved hanging out with this guy. He came back over and over again. A couple of years later, he said, you know, I'd like to move here. And we thought, yeah, that'll never happen. And so a week before school was out, he was in Wichita. We got a call, and he said, "I'm moving out there, and I'll be there in a week." I said, "Really? Where are you going to stay?" Anyway, so he ended up moving here, and the rest is history.
Next question is for David. You can pass down the mic. David, you've done ministry out here. You haven't been out here lately, but what I'm curious about is share your heart. What did Native peoples mean to your brother? And how did that shape his life? How did that change his life?
A few things come to my mind. Mitch can probably answer this question better than me because he was out here with him. But there are a few things. One, I think, especially coming here, I know he talked about so much of the scriptures are written in and through a shepherding culture. And so one of the draws here was the Navajo people shepherd. And so, hey, wait, what can I learn about God by being among people who understand what this is that I don't? And so one of the things that I appreciated was in his coming out here. I think he came out to give what he had, but he also came out to learn and to receive. I just think that's really important. Another thing, I think my understanding from, because he was way older than me, about your age, right? Oh, sorry. They said when he was little and he would watch westerns that he would weep because he's like, it's their land. This is not, the Cowboys winning is not good. This is wrong. And so I think Jesus talking about loving the least of these, I think he always wanted to be a missionary and realized if he didn't reached out to others here in this country, he could still tour and make a living and not ask other people to pay his way. So I think there were a ton of things, but I think it was a place that he could go and live out the love of Christ to a people that he really felt needed it, and be able to do it in a really genuine way that, hey, here's what I have to offer. What do you have to offer? Let's make the most of that and learn what we can about God in the process. So, long and winding answer.
Mitch, anything on that? The same question?
Yeah, well, kind of all that stuff, but it was similar to the Romans occupying Israel in the scriptures. Rich talked about this being an occupied country, and wanted to look at it like that. Rich tended to talk a lot, and he loved the fact that the Navajo culture was fairly closed-mouthed and silent much of the time, and so he was drawn to that.
Is that because he could talk more?
People would listen to him.
David, I want to ask you another question real quick, and that is that, in the last few years, you've become a movie producer, an actor, a real thespian, and did you ever see that coming?
No. No, not, yeah.
Well,
no, it's been a wild, man, my life from the accident about a month and a half after the accident, we knew we were going to start the legacy and try to support a ministry that would work among the Native Americans in multiple places. And I had somebody, when I got home from the funeral tour, asked me, sorry that it felt like that, asked me if I felt the need to continue his work. And I'm like, Nope, I'm a preacher. He's a musician. Yeah, no, I got nothing. About a month and a half later, I woke up one morning going, I think I'm supposed to move to Wichita, or my family, and we were supposed to be a part of starting the legacy. And I made Moses look excited to go back to Egypt. And God won in the end. And from that moment, I went, my life is never going to be, I'm never going to have a clue. And now 20 years later, I got no clue.
So something I've always been curious, David, not knowing you. My question is, do you ever get sick of having to talk about your brother all the time? Does it ever get old where you're like, oh, this is what I'm called to now? Does that get old?
Yes and no. I think for me it gets old when the conversation can never go past him. So yeah, when it gets stuck there and your brother, and you go, he could be a real jerk. And he did some really good things, but there's something so much more important that if you get stuck on him, you missed everything that he was trying to do. So when that happens, it gets old. When it is, no, God really used this guy through him and despite him to really impact lives. That doesn't get old. I would love to think that my life could matter to the place that 20 years after I'm dead, somebody wants to get together and talk about what God did. So, yeah.
I'd like to ask a question to Andrew Osenga. I know that Rich was a huge influence on you just as a singer-songwriter. And, as far as just his impact as an artist, what do you see his influence in today's artists?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, I want to say I didn't know Rich. I never met him, never saw him in person, so I feel like I don't deserve to sit here with you guys. But it was deeply shaped just by the songs that he wrote, and in the Nashville community, as far as people who are making music these days, I think I see both a legacy of people that learned that you can sing about more than just black and white truths, that you can talk about mystery, you can talk about doubt, you can talk about questions, you can talk about things that don't seem to have anything to do with God, but fall under the category of something that exists, and so we get to talk about it because it's all part of God's creation. I also see the lack of someone who is the interesting thing to an outsider, to somebody who just is a music business guy, songwriter guy, is that Mitch, or you talk to people who, and their image of Rich is either that he was this great worship singer-songwriter who wrote all these big worship courses, or he's this rebel indie guy. And but then you listen to the records, well, he was both. I'm sure he was a lot other than that, but people kind of want to claim him for their own, and he sort of defied that in that he was able to be a kind of punk and have big hits on Christian radio and then go to those places and actually say the things that you wish you could say if you got to go to those places. And either we dumb down what we have to say when we get in those rooms and we don't use our voice when we have it, or we're so busy being anti that we never get a chance to speak in those places. And so biggest thing I really see is the lack of someone who's able to thread that needle and speak in those places.
Something of a follow-up question again for Andrew. What can the Christian music industry, what's left of it, what can it do to remember its artists?
I think that's a really good question. Sorry, you were going to say more then.
Yeah, if you have thoughts on it, go ahead. Do you have any ideas? Do you have any conception of what we can do? It's so easy to forget. I think the other music industry, that they kind of have a built-in structure sometimes, reissuing old records. There's just not the market there for.
Yeah, most of Rich's records are out of print. It's,
I mean, there's a. I could talk about this for a long time, and I will not bore you with it. but there is most. If you're into jazz, you can find a long history of people paying homage to the jazz people that came before them. If you're into country music, the same thing. If you're into singer-songwriter music or classical music or sort of almost any genre, people are referencing the things that came before them, except for Christian music, which does not do that at all. It's really weird, and I think that there's a lot of conflict of how people view the music that was made in CCM over the last 20, 30 years. I think a lot of, I don't know. I wish I had an answer for you. I will say this, I don't know that there's a whole lot, I want to say this respectfully, there has to be something worth remembering. And there are some things worth remembering, and I hope that we can do a better job celebrating those. But it was a small market then, and so very few people remember the things that are worth remembering. And as it is a small market now, to find the wavelength to also spend time remembering is hard to do. And so that's why I'm excited for events like this and podcasts and things that can help people remember what went before and to know that there's a history.
Okay, quick question for Mitch, and then Joe has a follow-up. Mitch, I was curious, did your family think you were crazy when you moved out here? Were they like, what? He's doing what? I'm curious about that.
Yes.
There you go. That's all I want to know.
Quick follow-up. Well, you were out here. It's great to see you again, too. You were out here about a year ago with us, and I remember after the concert, we were over at Denny's, and you said something that just totally struck me, is that your life out here for about a year was that of a construction worker. What was your day-to-day routine with Rich when you lived out here?
We would get up way earlier than I wanted to, and we would pray and read the scriptures. And then just over there, we started building these hogans, the 8-sided traditional Navajo dwellings to live in.
That was pretty much it.
It took a long ass time to do. Because we didn't know what we were doing. So Rich just had, we were living in a trailer over there and across the wash, right behind the FINA station. I don't know if it's still over there, but that was the thing. Past the mortuary, past the FINA station, and turn left, go down the roads that are bumpy, and all of them. And we had that trailer, but Rich had this idea that we would build these hogans to as our individual living quarters, and then we keep the trailer for plumbing and kitchen and stuff. And so it took about 9 months to get Rich's done. We would get up early, do that stuff that I talked about, and then start working, and build and build and build and build, not knowing what we were doing. But eventually eventually you could see some progress, and that took 9 months, and we got that one done, and then we started in on the next one, and that was our day from whatever until sun up until sundown, and then we fly out on the weekends and do concerts. But I was a construction worker. Did I like it? was a growing experience. It was a growing experience, and I'm super, super grateful for it. Would I have chosen it? No, I wouldn't have. But then we got Rich's done, and then he lived in that for I'm gonna say about 2 months, and then we got mine done, and I lived in it for 3 days, and then we left for tour, and then all the stuff happened, Then the wreck happened, and but the Hogans got done.
Thanks, Mitch. Beth Lutz. Beth totally made my day today. Like, this was like the highlight of my day. I'm standing in the parking lot. We're scrambling like maniacs to get stuff done. And I turn around, and Beth is this close to my face. And she's like, "Hi." I was like, "Oh, my gosh, you're here." No warning that she was coming or anything. So, Beth, thank you so much for being here.
Warning. Did you hear that warning?
No warning.
And I didn't hear it.
Oh, but thank you for being here. It means a lot to us. What does it mean for you to be here tonight? I know that you visited Rich out here, I think, in '96. And is this your first time back?
Yep. Yes. Yep, I had to pull over on the way here. And just when I saw Window Rock, it was like, ooh, I need to process this.
Beth, no, thank you so much for being here. I know it's an emotional experience, and so good to see you again. And I appreciate everybody here that showed up tonight to join us for this. We did have one more question. You want to go with that, Chris?
Yeah, I have one last question before we get going with our concert.
And I think this is for everybody.
This is for everybody. Kind of I'm curious, a quick response. Let's do some creative imagining. There is no right answer to this. I'm kind of curious. You're going to base this answer on your own relationship with your friend or with the artist that you look to for inspiration. But just simple question. Brainstorm with me. What would Rich Mullins be doing if he were still with us today? How would his career have shifted? Would he have been in the arts in the same way, in the industry? How would he have shifted? And you don't have to come up with the right answer, but I'm just curious what you might be saying, what you might think. A question for everyone.
I don't know what he would be doing, except he'd be writing. I think he'd be doing a lot more writing outside of the music spectrum as well. I think he was dabbling in that quite a bit, and that would have been pretty awesome. I miss the things that he would be writing about our world today, because then he had a way of framing things that made it possible to hear difficult things in a way that was unique. But I really miss the music that he'd be writing. And he'd be right. He couldn't not write. He wrote, he was breathing, he was writing. So I think he would be involved out here, but he'd also be involved in, I would think, third world places in the world. The South America and Thailand and places like that. I think his heart was really drawn to the very simple places in humanity that just worked to live,
Yeah, I don't. Man, I got no idea. I think he would be a grouchy old man.
He would.
I think he was actually kind of looking forward to being a grouchy old man. So
that's good enough.
That's I think what he'd be doing, whether it's musical or not. He'd be.
What would Rich today have thought about a movie being made about him?
Oh man, I got no idea. Fortunately, I don't really care, because he ain't gonna do nothing about it. So, as a little brother will say.
I think he would have liked it. and known that he shouldn't. That was kind of it. He talked about
Well, I never knew him, so I can't say what I think he would be doing.
Then I'll work up to
Okay, you work up to it. I'll just say that I hope he'd let me hang out with him and write songs.
Well, I think one thing he'd be doing is probably eating green chili corn chowder down at Quality Inn. And then he'd probably come over late at night and say, "Hey, Mitch and I just wrote a new song. Could we come try it out on you?" Which really meant he wanted to watch a movie, which really meant he wanted to go get some more food and hang out. And then about midnight, he would want to start the movie after he'd talked, and he would have been cussing out Trump like nobody has ever done before. And anyway, he would have been the life of the party like he always was. And I think, though, he would still be sinful rich, but he would still know how to come back to Jesus and repent and bring us all to the cross and realize we're all just messy, screwed up people that love the holy God. That's what he'd be doing.
Yeah. He talked about wanting to get thrown in prison, so that the government would pay for his housing, and the government would sustain him. So he was trying to figure that out, how that would go down. One time towards the end of stuff, he said, people ask me how long I'm going to keep going to do this. I said, why do you keep doing this? He said, I can't stop. I can't stop. So it was just like this combination of resignation and determination. And so I think he'd still be going. I think he would be writing a lot more in a songwriter sense. His gift was communication. So he would be doing that. And the mediums are even more and further than they were, in the 90s. So his gift of communication would still be going forward, and the essence would be the same, regardless of the mediums that I'm sure would bother him to the core, with the vastness of the cyber world and technology and stuff. But he would be using that to communicate what's of value, like Chuck was saying. And so who knows, but he would be still being rich.
Thanks, Mitch. Thank you, Beth, David. Oh. She asked how many cell phones he'd have by now. Oh, thank you all for being here tonight and for agreeing to do this with us, and of course Andrew and Chuck and Mitch and as well. And thank you to my co-host, partner in crime here, Chris Marchand, who flew all the way out from Peoria, Illinois to be here tonight. And we want to give a special shout out to the guy who should be sitting up here but isn't, Eric Hauk back there at the booth. And Eric is working hard to make sure that we have lights and sound and everything tonight, and so he's scrambling, and that's why he can't be up here with us, but he absolutely should be.
So thanks, everyone, for being here. We appreciate your presence here with us. Joe, when is the concert going to start?
In just a few minutes.
So just give us a few minutes. We're going to make sure everything's up and running, and then we're going to begin. Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us.
And now we get to listen to one of my favorite people to listen to in the world. It'll be a real treat. This is Rich's brother, but my goodness, just a wonderful, wonderful speaker. This is David Mullins.
Well, is everybody doing all right? Thank you so much for being here. Cool night in more than one way. So, I'm from Florida. This is getting past cool. So, I get to talk, and I'm tired. I don't know about y'all. But when they asked me to come out and speak, I was very grateful for the opportunity, grateful that this was happening. So, but then I started really thinking about and praying about, well, Lord, what is there to say that hasn't been said? And so I felt like I ought to talk about living a life of impact. Because I don't know about y'all, but does anybody here want to live a life that when you come to the end of it, it didn't matter? You didn't, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I don't think I've ever been to a memorial service 20 years after somebody died. Anybody done this before? I'm like, I haven't. But man, I kind of hope that I live a life that even if nobody does it, somebody would think about doing it. That there'd be enough people that were impacted by my life that there could be a memorial 20 years later, not just by my kids. Going, remember when he did that? He could be a real jerk. Anyway, I told you I was tired. And I can be scattered when I'm wide awake. So anyway, so there's when I was growing up, the little church that we went to in Indiana had at Christmas time my favorite Christmas Eve service. And no church that I go to and have gone to in the last 15 years will do it because they go, nobody wants that. I'm like, well, they should. What we did was our Christmas Eve service started at 11:30. And it was with candlelight, and we had communion, and it was very quiet and very peaceful, and you got done right at midnight, and it was Christmas. I loved it. Well, one of the things that for me growing up, Rich was, like I said, a long time ago, I think it was 2 days ago earlier when we were doing the Q&A, he was way older than me. He was 12 years older than me. So one of the things that for me growing up, and he was the third in line in our family, and I was the baby. So one of the things that Christmas always was, it didn't really always matter what day Christmas was. It was when all of our siblings got home. So that might be the Christmas day. It might be a few days before, it might be a few days after. You just didn't know when it was actually going to be, oh no, this is it, right? Everybody's together, because that was Christmas for us. Anyway, so I remember one Christmas sitting at the Christmas Eve service, and there was a little boy that could not sit through it, right? Anybody got little boys? He just can't do it. It's Christmas. I got to get home. Let's go. Let's get this thing on the road. Anyway, so he got up and went out the back of the sanctuary or the worship center, as we now call them. And when he went out the back, he came back in completely like, Mom, Grandma. What? Shh. This is a quiet thing. Jesus is here. And they went, oh, yes, honey, you're right. Jesus is here. We're celebrating Jesus' birth. No, he's downstairs by the back door. What had happened? Rich came home. And at that time, he had long black hair, a big black beard. You know, he's a little dark-skinned. The kid thought he saw Jesus. Little did he know. So I've been thinking about leaving a life of impact and thinking about what I've observed and learned from my big brother. One thing. If you really want to leave a life of impact, you got to be present. You got to be with people, right? One of the things Rich did that I believe had an impact here is a guy that didn't need to, chose to move to the Navajo reservation to be with people, to go, man, here I am. I'm a musician. I can't do anything, but I can play you a song. I can be with you. Here I am. Who are you? Let me learn from you. Let me be with you. He built a hogan, I think maybe partly to be with you all. Build it badly. I got to go in it once and I closed the door and you could see light around all four sides of that door. And not just a little bit. It's like, oh my gosh, my dad would have killed you for that. But he came to be with people. But it wasn't just moving to the Navajo res. It wasn't just coming to be here, to be with people. He and Beaker started what they called Kid Brothers, and what they did, the whole plan was to disciple young men. The way they did that was by being with people. They said, hey, Eric, why don't you not be a doctor? Why don't you come be with us and go on the road? And why don't you learn about Jesus? Come be with us, and we're going to learn together. And we're going to find God together, and we're going to grow. And we're going to do it together. Today I did an interview on the local radio station here, and Pat was the DJ, and he did the interview, which at one point he was like, I just got to tell you, this is just a little bit odd, because when I met your brother, he sat in that seat right there, and you look a little bit like him, and you sound a little bit like him, and this is just a little weird. But he said, you know what? He said, I didn't spend hardly any time with Rich, but the first time that I met him, he was down here visiting, and like people were leading him through our facilities and giving him the tour. And Mr. Mullins, come over here, and Mr. Mullins, look at this. And he said they were coming through, and they were going on into the next thing, and he just sat down in the chair. And they kept going, and he didn't. And he asked me, I think he said he asked him what his name was, and he said, he spent about 5 minutes with him just talking, and he said, what you're doing is important. Keep doing what you're doing. That was 20 years ago. Maybe 5 minutes. Be with people if you're with them for 5 minutes. Be with them. Do you want to leave an impact? It's not always by years and years and years. Sometimes you have an impact by just a minute. Sometimes you leave an impact by signing a stick for somebody. Right? We heard that tonight. And now it's laying on his desk and it brings strength at times. Be sure you're with people. Be present in the moments, whether it's 5 minutes or 50 years. You want to leave an impact? You be present. And my real big brother, the one who really matters, was present. You see, he left the glories of heaven. And he wrapped himself in our flesh. And he walked in our dirt. And our hands touched him and our eyes beheld him. And he felt our pain so that he could be present with us. You see, the most important things that I learned through my big brother, Rich, are really things that I learned from my big brother, my Lord and my Savior brother. He taught us, if you want to leave an impact, you be present. Another thing, be real, be authentic. One of the things that I think Rich left an impact, some good, some bad, was he was who he was. Kind of whether you liked it or not, whether it was politically correct or not. I remember being at a concert, and every concert I ever attended, he said something, I was like, you cannot say that. I remember being at a concert when Clinton was president, and Clinton had flown into, I think it was Clinton, he had flown into Denver, and he sat on the tarmac and got a haircut, and they wouldn't let any planes take off while Clinton was in Air Force One on the tarmac, because it's just not safe. And so Rich's flights got all fouled up. All because Clinton needed a haircut. And I don't know if it was the next concert that he did or shortly thereafter, but he was railing on Clinton. And he said, there's still hope. There are still plane crashes. And I was like, oh, you cannot say that. What is wrong with you? He was who he was. I think if you want to leave an impact, you got to be real. He told the story of writing Hold Me Jesus. And I believe the story goes that he and Beaker were on a train in Europe. And they had just been sitting and talking, and they're in Europe, so they figure nobody probably speaks English. So we can talk pretty openly, and they were talking about some of their struggles, and said they got done talking about it, and somebody came up to him and said, excuse me, but aren't you Rich Mullins? Are you Rich Mullins? And the time I heard him tell this story, he said he thought about it for a little bit to think back over what he had just been talking about, and the guy had overheard, and decide if he was Rich Mullins or not. He concluded that he was, whether he liked it or not. Be real. A lot of people were impacted by his music, but I think more people were impacted by his life. And I think one reason is this, because his music was authentic to his life. He wrote hard to get, late in his life. I don't know many Christian musicians that are going to write hard to get. Because, man, that don't make you feel good. But I don't know about y'all, but it's one of the things that I loved about my brother. When he went, man, God, you're hard to get. He wrote it. And that's a song that my soul recognizes. Be authentic if you want to make an impact. You be really who you are all the time in everything that you do. Don't come up with pretty words to make you sound like you really love God. Do or don't, but be true to it, one way or the other. Now, let me say this. Sometimes I hear people talking about be real, be authentic, and they're like, that's all that matters. You can be an authentic jerk, all right? That ain't a good thing. Being authentic and being a... It's late. I ain't supposed to say those things. You know what you can be. Man, that didn't help anybody. I think the way to be authentic and make a difference and really matter, well, it will matter, but it'll matter in a bad direction, is this, man, who has Christ called me to be? Who is Jesus in me? Man, I'm going to fail at it. I'm going to yell at my wife. I'm going to beat my dog, whatever. I'm not going to beat my dog. I will yell at my wife, and I will be sorry for it, even before she makes me sorry. I've lost my train of thought. If you want to leave an impact that really matters, man, set your sights on Christ, the author and the perfecter of your faith, the one who began a good work in you and the one who will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus, and join him in what he's doing. And I believe that when we are authentically pursuing Christ, we cannot help but have an impact on the people we encounter. Be present. Be real. And the last thing, since I'm a preacher, you got to have 3 points. Be less. One of the things that I think Rich did well, for me anyway, was he had a real ability to, even at his very best for me, to point me to something beyond him. Because his songs, in and of themselves, might make you feel good, or might give you the opportunity to breathe a little deeper. But they can't save you. He had an ability to point me, and I hope to point you, to something much greater that really can fulfill. One of the things that scares me sometimes with, like I said earlier, with these kind of things, it doesn't make me so mad, it just scares me when I feel like people can't get past him. Because he ain't near enough. But there is one who is. John the Baptist would say when Jesus came on the scene, I must decrease and he must increase. I must become less so that he becomes more. If you want to have an impact, become less. It can be a challenge. I'm a preacher. There's a part of me that wants people to go, I just love to hear that guy. I just can't get enough of hearing him speak. And you're going, why? I don't get it. There's a part of me that wants, because I don't know anybody who doesn't want to do what they do well, right? I said earlier tonight to somebody, I don't know a mother who cooks a meal and goes, yeah, I hope they hate this. We want to do it well. We want, right? It's that catch. I want to do what I do well. But man, ever want to be such a good preacher that people remember me above the one who I'm talking about. You want to leave an impact? Become less. Be sure you're pointing people to a hope that's beyond you. Be sure that you're pointing people to something that will last 20 years, 50 years, 1,000 years after you're gone. There's only one thing that I believe can do that. And that is the presence of Jesus Christ in our lives. So my brother walked into this country church in Indiana one Christmas Eve and realized he was late, and so he wasn't going to go up and go into the service. So he sat down on the bench by the door to wait till it got over. And this little boy saw him and mistakenly thought he was Jesus. Man, I want to be mistaken for him. How cool would it be that if when somebody met you and walked away, they went, I just met Jesus. And maybe somebody else goes, no, that's just whatever your name is. But their soul recognizes, nope, that was Jesus. Because he was present. Because he was authentic to the very core. And because the flesh that I saw was so little that I was able to see that which resided within it. Do you want to leave an impact? Be like Jesus. Be present. Be real. Even when people don't like it. Because you know they didn't particularly care for him. And I don't sometimes. And point people to something so much more.